On this episode of Locked On Lightning, we talk about where do the Lightning stack up right now against the NHL. Most importantly, with the move of Matthew Tkachuk coming to the Atlantic Division, where do the Lightning and the Panthers stack up against each other? We'll talk about all that and more, but first, let's play that music.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. This episode of Locked On Lightning is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online, where the game starts. If you're watching us on YouTube, you could tell that we are only doing audio only today. Had a little snafu with the camera, but we'll be back up and running tomorrow. On this episode, we'll be discussing where do the Lightning, how we view this Lightning team right now at this point in time. Lost some pieces this offseason, gained some new pieces as well. And also with the big news last week breaking that Matthew Tkachuk is now a Florida Panther. Where do we view the Florida Panthers in the Atlantic Division? Are they going to be better? Are they going to be worse? We'll talk about that a little later on. So why don't we discuss the current state of this Lightning team thus far? If you want to follow along, you can look at dailyfaceoff.com, look at the line combinations, because that's where I'm going to mainly be drawing my predictions, I guess, or where I feel this team is at this point in time. So looking at this Lightning team, some new faces, like I said, some of the same old faces as well. Mainly the new faces here on this team really is Vlad Nasmestnikov on the third line with Nick Paul and Ross Colton. And quite frankly, I don't think that that's going to be a line that we're going to see all season long. And maybe call me a hopeless, optimistic person, but I really think that, and some of you let me know below, whether it be on YouTube or on our social media pages, on Twitter or Instagram, how you feel about this, that I still think that Alex Barré-Boulet is going to be the forward going forward for this Lightning team to be playing on the wing for the Lightning, especially as the injury bug is going to make its way to the Lightning at some point, because let's face it, this Lightning team over the last couple of years especially has been hit hard by the injury bug, whether it be on their forward lines, especially. I mean, it's usually really been the same guys every season, really, for the most part. It seems like since 2019, at least, 2020, really, it's really been Stamkos, Point, or Cooch at any given time that are missing time. And then you have some guys here and there as well. But other than that, the lines 2 through 4 have really done a good job, at least on the forward side, of staying healthy. Now, we've seen some guys battle the injury bug here and there, but we haven't really seen anybody miss a significant amount of time. And I think that's really going to be the eye opener for John Cooper and this Lightning team going forward, because like I said, as talented as I think Namestnikov is, and Lightning fans should be no stranger to him, as he has been on this team before, I still think that Alex Barré-Boulet, who was with this team during 20 and 21, played a bigger part, I guess, during the 21 season. I think there's a lot more talent there. He's a little younger than Namestnikov, and he's played with this group of guys a lot more. And he's been in the big situations as well. Namestnikov has been around the league a little bit. But at the same time, I still think Barré-Boulet has a lot of upside. Some people might beg to differ on that just because he has been with this Lightning team thus far. He has been waived, went to Seattle, came back, all that song and dance. But I think really, with the lack thereof of injuries that we might see from the bottom six, and that might be subject to change, just because if you look at the fourth line, you do have 3 guys that are in their early to mid 30s. So that is going to be a factor as the season progresses, especially for a guy like Patrick Maroon and Corey Perry, who have played quite a significant amount of games over the last 3 years. The clock is ticking, really, on them, not so much on their NHL careers, but when are we going to see that injury or that game where they come down with some sort of ailment that will eventually put them on the in the stands or at home, at least for an extended period of time. So I really think that in the little bit of ice time that we will see early on from Barre Boulet, I really think that that is going to tell the tale of where this Lightning team is, especially early on in the season and down the road. Because, like I said, I think Namestnikov is a very solid third line winger, especially with Paul and Colton, and especially Paul and Colton, who had both fantastic seasons last year. I still don't think that that winger spot for Namestnikov, I still think that is up for grabs. And we might very well see it, the name change on this line come training camp once opening night begins. But let me know in the comments below what you think for that. Like I said, I'm not fully convinced that Namestnikov has that spot locked down, but wouldn't be if he does. That's great. That means that he's playing well and that Cooper sees a lot of potential in him for being able to do good things on that third line. Now, looking at the defensive pairings, last time I actually looked at this, it was a little bit different, and I'm glad it's been changed since then. But right now, as it holds, we have Foote and Hedman on the first line, with Chernak and Sergachev, and then quite of I would say almost an interesting pair on that third, and Ian Cole and Zach Bogosian. Now, I don't have the problem on that third line pairing with Bogo and Cole, just because they both have a ton of experience between the both of them. They have both won at the highest level of hockey before. Cole obviously winning a cup with the Penguins, and then Bogo winning his cup with Tampa back in the bubble. But I'm curious, as the season goes along, how early on, or maybe even in training camp. Now, obviously, this projected lineup has been put up by Daily Faceoff. This isn't coming straight from the horse's mouth of John Cooper as to who's going to be playing where. We might see very well opening night be a completely different outlook of this lineup, but obviously we have to look at this, and we also have to pick it apart here and there. Um, and we all know how John Cooper likes to switch things around throughout the course of the season. I wouldn't be surprised at some point he even drops Steven Stamkos or Point to that second line. But looking at the defensive pairings, I don't mind Foote on the first line, and I've spoken quite a bit about Cal Foote. This is his year. I saw a lot of good things from him being a young player, and this really being his first year at the NHL level. I really liked how he handled himself. I saw a lot of potential there for Cal Foote to become an offensive type player, a two-way defenseman, especially. Not at the level of what we see Victor Hedman. I still think he has a long ways to go before we could even put him in the same comparison as Victor Hedman. But I think right now it's a little premature to look at Cal Foote and say that he's ready for that responsibility to play on the opposite side of Victor Hedman. I would feel, and I'm sure some Lightning fans would feel the same way, would feel a lot better if you had a Zach Bogosian or even an Eric Chernak. Eric Chernak has played fantastic since pretty much his entire time he's been with Tampa, and this past playoff run has really shown that growth continue with Eric Chernak. A lot of people don't realize that Eric Chernak is still very young. He's not even 30 yet. So there's still a lot of growth there in his game, regardless of how you feel about certain players. And when the growth really does stop with these guys, I think these guys are still getting better and better and developing every day. I still feel the same way about Victor Hedman. As great as a player as he is, I still think that there's some things that he could work on, and there's some things that he will work on and eventually improve on. But looking at this first line, I don't think Cal Foote, especially on opening night, especially in the first couple of weeks of the season, I don't think he should be up on that first defensive pairing. I wouldn't objectify to him being thrown all the way down to the third line, switch him with Bogo, or even put Chernak on the first line. At least you have someone with a little bit more experience on the ice with Foote. I'm not saying that with Hedman. I just feel like if on that first line pairing, you need to have your two best defensemen, which is why I think at least for opening night, or if we're speaking in hypotheticals, I would really like to see Victor Hedman on the first line with Eric Chernak. I think both their styles complement each other. And then you have Foote, even if you're looking for him and you see that offensive output starting to really progress early on in camp, I think then you should put him on the second line with Sergachev. I think Sergachev needs kind of like that guy on the other side. Sergachev, and let's face it, Sergachev has really not been able to progress as much as we would like him have to, especially after the bubble a couple of seasons ago. It looked like things were starting to go on the up and end, and then really you kind of saw his performance and his progress somewhat stall. And I'm not going to say that he's a bust, because clearly he's not. He's had his moments, but I think really what it was for Sergachev this year was that there was moments where it wasn't so much the physical aspect, and the ability's there. We've seen it. But the issue with Mikhail Sergachev, I think, is the mental lapses in judgment. We've seen that quite a bit, and I spoke about it during the playoff run, because that's where the Lightning, mainly Mikhail Sergachev, ran into some issues. And it wasn't just Sergachev throughout the playoffs; it was also pretty much the entire defensive core, uh, almost inviting the opposing player to inch up on them on the blue line and then pass last minute, and then that results in in turnovers at the blue line and fast breaks down the other end, which Sergachev has been infamous for over the last year. And so really, if he could just take that out of his game, if he could cut down on that, the frequency of that, I don't have a problem with Sergachev on the second line. I think everything else will come in due time. The scoring will come. I think he needs to be a little bit more aggressive. And I think that has kind of sort of an effect, that trail off in points and offensive production. That's kind of from the fact that he's playing a little timid there, because he is aware of the turnovers at the blue line and doesn't want to do too much that will result. I think having an off season to kind of think about it, work on his game, will be great for him. And the fact that having a guy like Cal Foote, who is still in kind of the midst of trying to figure things out in his NHL career, I think that's a good tandem on the second line. So we'll see how things progress throughout the course of the offseason. Who knows? The Lightning might make a deal at some point to get another defenseman, or bring someone up from Syracuse who might be turning some heads in September camp going into October. So we'll talk about Matthew Tkachuk in the Atlantic Division. What does that mean for the Lightning? What does that mean for the Panthers and the Lightning, the battle of the Sunshine State? We'll talk about that. But first, I want to talk about today's sponsor, and that is Bet Online. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the number one online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, the NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. So head to BetOnline today, or use your mobile device to learn about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. So I just like to take a moment to thank all of you for making us your first listen of the day. You could go ahead and subscribe to the podcast anywhere audio is distributed. So that's Spotify, Google Play, iTunes, wherever. I think Stitcher as well, wherever they are distributing audio podcasts in that. Go ahead, we are there. And also go ahead and subscribe to us on YouTube. We had a great deal of people follow us during the postseason, and I want to continue that growth heading into the season, as the Lightning will start their 30th season in the NHL. So, a little bit of a historic season coming up for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And we want all of you to stay on top for that. And also go ahead and follow us on our social media pages at L_Lightning on Twitter, as well as LockedOn_Lightning on Instagram. You can find me on Twitter at DankyDank, DENKYD8NK. Tweet to me your questions about the offseason. What are my predictions for the Lightning? Whatever you want to ask me, go ahead and do that, as well as in the comments section below on YouTube. So looking at the biggest trade, I think, of the offseason. I mean, it's the biggest move, I think, of the offseason, really, regardless whether it's free agency, trades, whatever. And that is the trade that landed Matthew Tkachuk in South Florida. Now, what does that mean for the Lightning? And I think really, if you look at this division, I really think that in a way, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. I heard some people on Twitter. There were some people on Twitter that were shooting back at me, and that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion, but I really think when you look at the Atlantic Division, you need to ask yourself with this Matthew Tkachuk trade, you traded Mackenzie Weegar as well as a prospect and Jonathan Huberdeau, who was in the top 3 for the Hart Trophy, I believe, conversation at some point. If not, he finished. I can't remember off the top of my head. But did you get better with bringing Matthew Tkachuk to South Florida? And my argument is not really. I mean, they signed him to a huge contract, 8 by 9.5, and the guy had his first 100-point season, and that's fantastic for him. What a great personal accomplishment, especially in the National Hockey League, as well as Jonathan Huberdeau, age 30, going back to Calgary. I think right now in the short term, whether you're looking at this as a Lightning fan, whether you're a fan of another team and you're listening to this, I think in the short term, until I am proved wrong, and it might not necessarily happen this year. This has to be consistent. I don't think the Panthers won or lost this trade. I think Calgary won in terms of what they're getting in return, especially out of the whole situation that was surrounding Matthew Tkachuk. But I don't think it necessarily made Florida any better and any more of a threat. Remember, you have we're talking about Florida, who had 122 points last year, won the President's Trophy, top of the division, and ended up getting swept by the Lightning in the second round. And I look at this Florida team compared to this Tampa team. I don't think they're necessarily any better, because obviously that is the really the motive in the offseason for every team, is to get better, to improve, or to stay competitive. I really think we're going to see more of the same this year out of the Sunshine State rivalry. Now, he already came out through a gauntlet down saying when he was in Calgary, he hated Edmonton. And now that he's in Florida, he hates Tampa, which obviously adds, if there's not already enough tension, I'm sure the first night when these two teams play, I'm sure that's going to be in the back of some of the Bolts players' minds, and they're going to let them know about, especially maybe Pat Maroon. I wouldn't be surprised if you see those two go toe-to-toe quite often as these two teams come to blows over the course of the NHL season. But I don't think Florida necessarily got better. I don't think they got worse. But if you look at their team, really, what is threatening from this team? Really, what player on this team is giving them more of an edge than what they already had last year? Because listen, yeah, we could talk all day and talk crap about how Panthers, how they played during the regular season against Tampa, and then really what it matters, especially against these two teams. And I think this is how Florida fans should treat it. And I kind of spoke about this when I had the crossover episode with Locked On Florida Panthers host Armando Velez during the postseason. That really all that matters is what happens in the postseason. That's really all it matters. I mean, the Lightning could have lost every matchup that they had against Florida during the regular season. That wouldn't have mattered much, especially in the playoffs, especially after, if you get swept or whatever. But looking at this team, I mean, yeah, they have a very talented team. Carter Verhaeghe, former Lightning player. It still is crazy to see him in a Florida Panthers uniform. Too bad the Lightning couldn't figure something out with him. You have him, Barkov, and Tkachuk, and that first line, I don't think that's better than Stamkos, Point, and Cooch. I think that they're almost there. I think if in terms of one being uncompetitive and 10 being a great line, I think Stamkos, Point, and Cooch all healthy and playing at their best. I think that's a 9. But if you look at Verhaeghe, Barkov, and Tkachuk, I think those guys are at least at a 7, 7.5. I think, and obviously, if you're going to compare these two teams, I think the Lightning win out on the first two lines. Now that's where the third and the fourth, the bottom six come into play, and we've spoken about on this episode on this show so many times over the years, how important it is for your bottom six to be competitive, to go out there and play well, and to be reliable. And I think that's where those games are going to be won. Some Lightning fans who are, if you're looking at the Florida Panthers lines right now with me on Daily Faceoff, and comparing it to what the Lightning have, until they go out there and prove otherwise, I don't think those checking lines, those third and fourth lines, can compete or even compare to what the Lightning have on their side. Now, obviously, Panther fans might feel a certain type of way, and that's completely fine. That's completely fine. But at the same time, let the record show what each player has done on those lines compared to against each other. And then obviously we don't have to get much into the goalie situation, because really what it comes down to it is that there are very few goaltenders, maybe 2 or 3 out there in the National Hockey League right now that could hold a candle to Andre Vasilevsky. And I could guarantee you those 2 are not named Sergei Bobrovsky. So really, the Lightning win out right there. And then again, I will talk about this on another episode, but that might change just a little bit with Andre Vasilevsky this season. He has had a great go of it thus far in his career, and I expect him to play better. But if anything proved here and there throughout the playoffs, especially in the later rounds, we might see a little bit of a setback year in terms of what Andre Vasilevsky could do. So check that out. I'll probably talk about that on the next episode. But what this Tkachuk deal means for Florida, as compared to what they could do against Tampa, and what we will see this season as well as in the playoffs, I don't think it changes much. I really don't. I don't think Florida's there right now. I still think Tampa is still the big brother team in the state of Florida, and I think it will be like that for a very long time. Florida needs to consistently play well, not only against Tampa, but in general in the playoffs. And you could switch out the names on the back of the jerseys all you want, but if you don't go out there and play games the right way and win, it doesn't matter. So until and call me crazy, but until they go out there and Tkachuk is a huge part of that success with the Florida Panthers, I'm not going to look at Florida any type of way in terms of them being different than what they were last year. I'll just end it with this: if Florida wins the President's Trophy, that's great for them. Another trophy for them in their very empty trophy case. But if you don't go out there and play that well in the Stanley Cup playoffs, then you know what? It really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. So let us know in the comment section on YouTube or on Twitter what you think about Florida right now. I already saw some people tweeting back to the show saying it doesn't mean anything. Tampa is still the big brother in the state of Florida. And yeah, until they do something different, until we see different results, I'm inclined to agree. So ending things here on the show, really, it's kind of, we're in that part of the season, well, the off season, where really not much is happening. We have some guests that will be coming on the show in a couple of weeks. So pretty excited for that. So keep an eye out for that. I'll give you a hint. One of them was drafted by Tampa in the draft, not to this previous draft. So check out that when it drops. That's my only hint for who it might be. But yeah, it's there's still a lot to be spoken about. There's still a lot of X's and O's, I guess, if you want to put it that way, in terms of what the Lightning can do. There's still a lot of names out there in the free agent market who have yet to be signed. Who one of them was Evan Rodriguez, who had a fantastic season with the Pittsburgh Penguins. And really, I would love to see him in a Lightning sweater. Now, as for money wise, I'm curious as to see how the Lightning would be able to make that work. So we'll talk about a little bit of what other moves the Lightning need to make this offseason. And we'll go from there. I'm excited to see. This is one of my favorite times of the year, just because it's a lot of hypotheticals, a lot of what ifs, and I love that for this Lightning team because there's always ways Julian Brees-Boss is looking to make this team better, and I don't think he's nearly done. I still think there's some names that are yet to be added that will be added before this training camp starts, and those names I wouldn't be shocked that they will be making big contributions to this team as the season starts. So, in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Denker. I'll talk to you in the next one.